first witness.
Yes, the state would like to call Mickey Keenan to the stand.
Mickey Keenan, please. Good afternoon, Mr. Keenan.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Have a seat. Mr. Keenan, you've been sworn previously, is that correct?
That is correct.
You understand that you're still under oath?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Officer Keenan.
Good morning.
Please state your name to the court, spelling your last for the record.
Well, I'm currently undercover, so I can't give my real name, but the alias I'll be using for today, it's Mickey Keenan, and that's K-E-E-N-A-N.
Officer Keenan, what is it that you do for a living?
I'm a detective for the Special Investigations Division of the Midland State Police Department.
What education do you have that allows you to hold this position?
Well, I enrolled in the Midland State Police Academy, where I quickly became the top of my class, and after I graduated valedictorian, I joined the force the day after.
Now, you work on the Special Investigations Division.
Yes.
What separates this division from other divisions in the Midland State Police Department?
What really sets us apart from everyone else in the department is the number of cases per year that we have to go undercover in order to resolve.
Do officers in your division go through any specialized training in order to work in that division?
Yes, members of my division receive very extensive training. We have to know everything about proper documentation, proper implementation of the READ technique, how to go about OIAs, and how not to induce criminal activity.
Now, Officer Keenan, I'd like you to explain a couple of those terms that you just used. Exactly what is an OIA?
Well, an OIA is short for otherwise illegal activity. And what this is so long as we receive authorization from a supervisor, we can do things that are otherwise considered illegal, so long as they further our investigation and do not induce the subject.
You also mentioned something called the READ technique.
Yes.
Would you please explain exactly what that is?
Yes, the READ technique is a questioning method used by investigators and interrogators.
And how do you use this in your investigation?
Well, you ask the suspect non-accusatory questions so that they feel comfortable in admitting and acknowledging the truth.
Now, you also mentioned documentation. Is there any documentation of your training?
Yes, all the training that we've received is very thoroughly documented.
Would you be able to provide that documentation here in court today?
Unfortunately, I'm currently part of another ongoing undercover investigation, so all documentation pertaining to myself and other officers on that case are being withheld from the public record.
How many undercover investigations have you been on since being in the Special Investigations Division?
The Bancroft-Covington case would be my 13th undercover case working for the force.
And what kind of cases do you typically go undercover for?
I've worked everything from human trafficking, drug trafficking, organized crime, all the way to white-collar crime. I mean, I've done it all.
Now, you just mentioned the Bancroft-Covington case. What is your involvement in this case?
Well, my involvement began back in July of 2013 when I was placed undercover, and it ended in April of 2015 when my investigation was concluded.
What led you to investigate the Midlands Gambling Commission?
The department had been receiving tips about corruption within the Midlands Gambling Commission. I was placed undercover to ascertain whether or not those rumors held any validity.
Did those rumors hold any validity to them?
Yes, we did find evidence of corruption.
Did that evidence of corruption tie back to the defendant or Chase Covington in any way?
Yes, it actually tied them both together.
Officer Keenan, how was Chase Covington involved with the commission?
Well, Chase Covington was actually the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission, and that put him in a pretty powerful position.
By a pretty powerful position, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, when I went undercover, I determined that the commission had 3 members, and while I was undercover, to the best of my knowledge, I found that the other 2 commissioners weren't fond of each other, and that they always voted in opposition of each other, which left Chase pretty much the absolute word as the swing vote.
Officer Keenan, did Avery Bancroft play any role in your decision to join the Midlands Gambling Commission?
Absolutely not. I was just doing my job at that point, which was to investigate the position, and Avery Bancroft was not a part of that commission. He wasn't even on my radar yet.
Then why did you begin investigating Avery Bancroft?
Well, for that, we have to go back to February of 2015. I was in Chase Covington's office when the phone went off, and I overheard a conversation between Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington on speakerphone.
In that conversation between Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington, what was said during that phone call?
Yes, the first thing Mr. Bancroft said was, "I'm glad I got the chance to talk to you. I saw the announcement. I'm putting together a proposal and I wanted to talk to you to, grease the wheels."
What was Chase's response to that statement?
Well, Chase's tone changed. Her voice got really harsh and she ended the phone call immediately before Mr. Bancroft could say anything else.
Now, after this phone call, how did you proceed with your investigation?
Well, at that point, I placed myself as an auditor on Chase's staff, and I reached out to Corey Hyde, Mr. Bancroft's executive assistant. Corey seemed like a good person to bring into this investigation because Corey was aware of all the evidence, or of all the meetings that Mr. Bancroft was having, and was also able to set those up. So that's how I was able to meet with Mr. Bancroft, Ms. Covington, and Corey Hyde.
Now, you met with all those parties that you just said. When did this meeting take place?
This would have been on April 13th.
How did this meeting begin?
Well, it began with Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft discussing the proposal. Eventually, Ms. Covington switched the conversation over to that of money, and Mr. Bancroft said, "Of course, it's always about the money with you."
What was your reaction after hearing those statements?
Well, those are the kinds of statements that we're supposed to look for in our investigation. So at that point, I picked up a napkin and a pen and slid it to Mr. Bancroft and repeated his own words, saying, "It's always about the money."
What was Avery Bancroft's response to you sliding that napkin and pen to him?
Well, Mr. Bancroft began writing on the napkin. He wrote on that napkin.
Officer Keenan, would you be able to recognize this napkin, a copy of this napkin, if I had it here to show to you today?
Yes, of course, I was sitting right there when it was written on.
Permission to approach the witness.
Granted.
Thank you.
Does the bench require a courtesy copy?
Not yet. Go ahead and ask him about it.
Officer Keenan, what is that I've just handed you?
Well, this would be a copy of the napkin that Mr. Bancroft wrote on during the April 13th meeting.
How do you know that it's the same napkin?
The writing is all there in the same place and it's been crumpled up.
Is that a fair and accurate copy of the napkin that Avery Bancroft wrote on?
Yes, it looks exactly the same.
Your Honor, at this time, prosecution moves to admit prosecution one into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
On that objection, so ordered.
Now, what did Avery Bancroft do with that napkin after he wrote on it?
He wrote yes equals $150K, which is yes equals $150,000, and slid it across the table to Miss Covington.
What was Miss Covington's response when Avery Bancroft slid that napkin to her?
Well, Miss Covington picked it up, looked at it for a minute, and then slid it right back across the table.
Now, after Miss Covington slid that napkin back to Avery Bancroft, what did he then do with it?
Mr. Bancroft crossed out the 150K before anyone said anything and wrote down right below it 250K. So now the napkin read yes equals $250,000 and then slid it back across the table to Miss Covington.
And what was Covington's response to that?
Well, Miss Covington at that point picked the napkin up and placed it in her pocket.
Officer Keenan, did you force Avery Bancroft to write on that napkin?
No, I never did anything like that. All I did was slide in the napkin and tell him that, and repeated his own words to him.
Did you force Miss Covington to take that napkin?
No, I didn't.
Now, after Miss Covington put that napkin in her pocket, how did the meeting proceed from there?
Well, it went on for a little while longer, and then there was a knock on the door. It was the bellhop, Devin Dalcessa, who worked at the Black Bear. He had brought up a wine and cheese platter, and upon seeing the bellhop, Miss Covington started sweating and stammering a little bit. She looked like she was getting really nervous.
Objection, Your Honor, as to speculation.
No.
This witness can testify to whether Miss Covington looked like she was nervous. This witness has said that she started sweating and she was shaking a little bit. It's in his rationally based perception to tell that she is nervous.
In the ordinary course of human events, people can make a judgment as to whether somebody looks nervous to them. If you want to investigate it further on cross, you can do that. I'm going to allow the objections overruled.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'll ask you again, how did this meeting proceed after Miss Covington then put that napkin in her pocket?
Well, after the bellhop answered the door, or after the bellhop knocked on the door with the wine and cheese platter, Chase, she appeared to get really nervous. She was sweating a little bit and she was stammering. Mr. Bancroft tried to reassure her that everybody that worked at the Black Bear knew how to be discreet, but Chase still ended the meeting immediately.
Now, did you have any other meetings between Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington?
There was supposed to be one more meeting, but Chase Covington didn't show up to that one.
When was this meeting supposed to take place?
This meeting was on April 16th.
Officer Keenan, are you aware of what this trial here today is about?
Yes, Avery Bancroft admitted to bribing Chase Covington for his vote. However, Mr. Bancroft is accusing me of forcing him to do it.
What is your response to that?
I would never do anything like that. That would be throwing away my career in an investigation that had been 2 years underway.
Thank you, Officer Keenan. I have no further questions for this witness, gentlemen.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Tim, would you like?
Good afternoon, Mr. Keenan.
Good afternoon, Miss.
My name's Hope Keen, and I'll be asking you a few questions.
Certainly, Miss Keene.
Now, you were hired by Mr. Kimmel, correct, to start this investigation?
I was hired by the force before Chief Kimball came in, but Chief Kimball did assign me to this investigation, yes.
And would you say you were thrilled by the idea of catching a big fish?
I was more excited about the fact that I would be getting a chance to tackle corruption. To me, it's kind of hard to clean the streets of Midlands up on the outside if the government itself is corrupt.
Mr. Keenan, just to redirect you back to my question, would you say that you were thrilled by the idea of catching a big fish?
High-profile cases they have a lot more at stake to them, so it is a little bit more thrilling, yes.
Is that a yes to my question, that you were thrilled by the idea of catching a big fish?
Yes.
And so you were asked to investigate the Midlands Gambling Commission, am I right?
Yes, I was placed undercover to investigate any possible corruption within the commission.
As a staffer, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In Mr. Covington's office, correct?
Yes, in Miss Covington's office.
And in Miss Covington's office, you were not aware of any disposition towards corruption, is that correct?
We had heard rumors within the department, which is why I was placed undercover. So for a large portion of my investigation, I was basically just surveying the commission to see if there was any corruption.
So you were in the commission for 1.5 years, correct, without any evidence of corruption gathered?
That's correct. And then the commission announced that they would be offering a new casino license to the entrepreneurs of the state.
Am I correct in saying that for 1.5 years, you were working under Miss Covington and you found no evidence of corruption in her office?
Correct.
And then you witnessed a phone call between Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington, am I right?
Yes, the mentioning during that phone call of greasing the wheels is a statement that we as officers are trained to look out for when we're undercover. So that renewed faith in my investigation.
You would actually say that you were waiting for an opportunity like this, isn't that correct?
I was waiting for any sign of corruption. This was one of them.
Would you say you were waiting for an opportunity like this one?
I was waiting for any chance of corruption, yes.
And so after this phone call, you took it upon yourself to call the executive assistant of Mr. Bancroft, am I correct?
Yes, when you don't have the police department to fall back on when you're undercover, you don't have a partner, you can't go back to the department, so it often becomes necessary to enlist the aid of civilians as informants for your investigation.
I'm just going to ask you to redirect you back to my question. Did you take it upon yourself to contact the executive assistant of Mr. Bancroft?
Yes, I reached out to Corey Hyde.
Miss Hyde. So you personally contacted Miss Hyde, is that correct?
Yes, via email.
And in your correspondence with Miss Hyde, you threatened her, am I correct?
I pressured the informant. That's an example of an OIA that I was talking about earlier. See, so long as I'm not pressuring the suspect, I'm free to pressure informants into helping me.
Mr. Keenan, I just want to clarify. Is it true that you threatened Miss Hyde that you would charge her without evidence if she did not comply with your investigation?
I implied that I had evidence of gambling violations against Corey Hyde.
Mr. Keenan, I would just like you to answer my question. Is it true that you threatened Ms. Hyde with charges without evidence if she did not comply with your investigation?
Yes, that's something that we are allowed to do, so long as it's not the suspect itself that we're threatening.
Is it true that there was no evidence for the charges that you threatened Ms. Hyde with?
That is true.
What did you ask Ms. Hyde to do I'm so sorry. You asked Ms. Hyde to schedule a meeting between herself, yourself, Mr. Bancroft, and Ms. Covington. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And is it correct that there were no meetings scheduled between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft before you threatened Ms. Hyde?
I'm not aware whether Corey Hyde or Ms. Bancroft had anything scheduled. I do know that I'm the one who asked for that meeting to be scheduled, though.
Mr. Keenan, when you were a staffer on Ms. Covington's commission, it's true you had full access to all private meetings, all commission activities, and all proposals. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. However, I was unaware. I didn't have access to any of Corey Hyde's plans or Avery Bancroft, so I had no way of knowing whether they would be reaching out to Ms. Covington.
But you had full access to Ms. Covington's private meeting schedule. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And there were no meetings between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft before you threatened Ms. Hyde. Is that correct?
None as of yet. That's correct.
And so I just want to talk about that meeting that occurred on April 13th. You were present at this meeting, am I right?
Yes, I was there.
And during this meeting, Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft talked about Mr. Bancroft's proposal.
Yes, that's true.
The discussion included logistics on square footage of the new casino, correct?
Yes.
And other matters pertaining to the proposal.
Yes.
And at one point, you handed a napkin to Mr. Bancroft. Am I correct?
Yes, that's true.
But he didn't write anything on it. He wiped it on his head. Am I correct?
That's true.
And so you handed him another napkin. Am I right?
Yes, this was after Avery Bancroft had brought up the fact that it was always about the money with Miss Covington when they were talking about the money during that meeting. I was just restating Avery's own words.
Oh, Mr. Keenan, I didn't ask you what you said. I was just asking you whether or not you handed him a napkin.
Yes, I did, and that was after Avery Bancroft had brought up the topic of money.
Did you give Mr. Bancroft a napkin?
Yes.
And he disposed of one, correct?
Yes.
And then you handed him another one, correct?
Yes, and then I said it's all about the money, or it's always about the money, and Mr. Bancroft then took it upon himself to write on that napkin.
Did he write anything before you handed him the napkin?
No, he did not.
Did he write anything before you said it's always about the money?
No, he didn't.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that the witness be excused.
The witness is excused, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let's see. Call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state calls Dr. Warren to the stand.
Dr. Warren.
Before we begin with direct examination, may I set up the courtroom for the use of demonstrative evidence?
You're just going to prepare to a space where you're going to use the demonstrative later on?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead.